So, Adam, welcome back to the show. It's a pleasure to sit down with you again. Please
Good morning. Thanks
reintroduce
for having me.
yourself.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me. Minister Adam, the co-congregation lead of the Satanic Temple, Illinois, also the campaign director or campaign director for the Satanic Representation Campaign. And I'm also one of the core committee that puts on SatanCon, the big satanic conference that we do for the Satanic Temple. Yeah, nice to be back.
Yeah. And I invited you back on because I saw the Satanic Temple of Illinois in the news lately or recently. I can share the headline story that I saw, but Adam, do you mind giving a background for folks that are listening and watching?
Totally, yeah, if you want to share for sure. So the short story is that I have sued the city of Chicago. The I reached out in January of 2020 to the clerk's office requesting to present or deliver an invocation before the city council meeting, which is a time-honored tradition of solemnizing the proceedings, open to religions, well, all religions once you open that forum. But it's a pretty common practice, and the city was initially responsive and then stopped being responsive for a very long time. And then somebody else got into that position, and I requested again, and that person was very responsive, and then they were not at all. And now it's been 3 years. I think it's like 1,217 days or something like that. And so on May 3rd, I filed a lawsuit. I lawyered up, and we filed a lawsuit against the city to demand that I get to present this invocation.
Yeah, and for folks, really quick, for folks that aren't aware of what the Satanic Temple is and what it stands for, I don't want to get into that today. I want to plug
Listen to the
our.
last episode.
I was going to say, listen to my last episode with Adam, and I just want to say that it's probably not what you think it is, and that's the teaser I'll give you. It's
I'll give you the TLDR.
There you
The
go. Thank
Satanic
you.
Temple is a non-theistic religious organization, which means that TST Satanists, by and large, do not believe in a literal Satan. It's a literary Satan. We take the inspiration from classic Romantic era literature and Enlightenment thought, things like Anatole France and Pierce Bryce Shelley and Milton's Paradise Lost and so on, of Satan being the hero fighting against arbitrary authority and tyranny. There's no gods, there's no Satan, there's no supernatural. It's none of that. The Satanic Temple's beliefs are codified by the seven tenets, which are an appeal to reason, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and they're easily look upable. And again, we went over a lot of this in the last podcast, so everyone can go and check that out. But that's your TLDR.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I could issue a challenge before you tell us about the invocation, folks, look up the seven tenets and tell me just one that you disagree with. There's a
Yeah,
challenge for you.
there you
Um,
go.
yeah, you like that?
I love
Um,
that.
so yeah, you're gonna find that you don't disagree with Satanists. I think that's what
And
you'll
even
find.
if you do, that's okay. Pluralism is great, and that's
Mhm.
one of the satanic values, honestly, is living in a society that is pluralistic with a variety of viewpoints that have equal access to every space, whether that be invocations before city council meetings, or the ability to hold office, or the ability to just exist. That's how plurality works. And a lot of times when a Satanist asserts their own rights to exist or exist in the same public sphere, participate in limited forums or whatever, people get kind of squingy. But the question that always needs to be asked is your distrust or discomfort with a minority religion more important than the constitutional values that you claim to hold correct and true?
Right.
And, at the end of the day, um, values don't mean anything unless you hold them true, even when it's hard to do so.
Yeah.
So,
And if you could, just for folks that are trying to understand this story a little bit more, would you be prepared to share us what an invocation typically sounds like? And the reason I bring that up is because much like the tenets, I think an invocation is like you listen to it and you're like, I agree with everything that was just said. So
Sure, I can read the actual invocation if you want.
please. Yeah.
I have to find it. Hang on one second.
No problem. No
Got
problem.
it.
For folks that are listening and want to read more about this story, we'll have a link in the podcast description. We'll also have a link to our recent podcast with Minister Adam so that you can learn more about the Satanic Temple of Illinois and just the Satanic Temple in general. So,
Yeah, I think that was last year, right? Last year,
yep, I think
8 months
so.
ago. I don't remember. Okay, I have it. I don't have the whole thing memorized, I'll be honest, but I got most of it done. All right, here it goes. I think we actually did I read it last time? I don't remember.
I think you may have, which is why I
Whatever.
think
Anyway,
I heard it and I was like, that's agreeable. So,
yep.
but yeah,
I'll read it. It goes like this. Let us stand now unbowed and unfettered by arcane doctrines born of fearful minds in darkened times. Let us embrace the Luciferian impulse to eat of the tree of knowledge and to dissipate our blissful and comforting delusions of old. Let us demand that individuals be judged for their concrete actions, not their fealty to arbitrary social norms and illusory categorizations. Let us reason our solutions with agnosticism in all things, holding fast only to that which is demonstrably true. Let us stand firm against any and all arbitrary authority that threatens the personal sovereignty of one or all. That which will not bend must break, and that which can be destroyed by truth should never be spared its demise. It is done. Hail Satan. That's it. That's the invocation.
I love it. I
Yeah,
love it. I especially love the last part. That which cannot bend must break. Is that right? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
It just it sticks with me, right? And for me, that's how I kind of try to deal with everything in my life, you know. If it doesn't stand up to my questioning, like then I question, is it worth my time? You know.
A
So I think
hundred
it's
percent.
yeah, it's interesting that most people don't realize, and again, I'm going to plug our last episode, that these are the values that you try to instill as the Satanic Temple, right? So
Absolutely. And I mean, it's such a, some would consider it's a very minor thing, but it can be as minor or as major as you need it to be, depending on the context. I mean, without getting too far into details, I challenged somebody not too long ago um, that didn't understand how bar markup works. And anybody in the service industry is going, oh shit, here we go. But bar markup is usually higher than retail markup. In other words, if you buy a bottle of beer at a retail store, your margin is going to be smaller than if you did at a bar. And the reason for that isn't because it's not just some arbitrary reason for that. It's because when you're drinking that beer on premise, you're using the space, you're using the lights, you're using the water, you're using, the liquor license to be open, the staff's time, the chemicals to clean glassware, and so on. And if you've never had to consider why a beer costs you $5 in a bar, or I guess these days $8 in a bar, yes, I'm old, $8 in a bar versus 65 cents in your six pack that you take home, that could be very challenging if it's some long-haired asshole telling you this. And so at that point you have to decide, am I going to update my worldview with new information, or am I going to hold fast to my previous idea of what this was and not learn anything and shut down and say, well, fuck you, or whatever. And people make these choices consciously, but also unconsciously all the time, based on all sorts of parameters of upbringing or background, or religious upbringing or schooling, or all sorts of different things. It just might have been something that nobody's ever, that person hasn't considered before. And so that which will not bend must break is really a question of crucifying one's own ego and deciding to roll with the punches, as it were, and learn and grow along the way, and realize, you can be wrong sometimes, and to embrace more knowledge as you continue forward on your journey through life, which I guess got kind of preachy, and I didn't mean it to, but I don't know. It was just a really funny example of one that happened to me recently that really embodies a very minor but important spirit of it. So
yeah. Well, I'm just glad you did bring it up during this short conversation we're having, in case people are still considering whether or not to check out our longer conversation. Because again, I think the issue is that the propaganda campaign was very effective against Satanism. You
Mhm.
know, the whole Dungeons and Dragons and Satanic Panic thing. I've been watching Stranger Things and notice how they
Oh
kind
yeah.
of reference it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was, I'm not, you know, it was like we've said, mindless, but it was, whether or not it was mindless, similar to cannabis, you know, prohibition, it may have been effective for better or for worse. In this case, for worse, in my opinion. But
Totally. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there too, like the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s. And I have a wealth of books behind me, including like some old primary materials on this kind of shit that law enforcement would use and so on.
wow,
Was yeah, I like collecting stuff.
yeah.
But actually I'm wearing my McMartin preschool class of 83 shirt right now. But people tend to think that this is like, excuse me, a historical thing that happened within a specific stretch of time. And so with Stranger Things living in that existence of like the, 83 to 92 range, that's when people tend to think about a lot of that. But the metrics of how a witch hunt like that happens goes back way longer than that. I mean, we're talking, the Taxil hoax, which was when this guy, Leo Taxil, during the French Revolution, was basically calling Freemasons part of a satanic cult, not to fuck with Freemasons necessarily, but to expose the Catholic Church for being garbage. And that conspiracy theory has stayed with it to this day, but it had all the same ideas of like creating paranoia. Freemasons were already an out group that were, kind of a small brotherhood and like in secrecy or whatever. And so they were, ripe for being a conspiracy theorist. The blood libel against the Jews, which we talked about, I think, in the last podcast when we were discussing, othering and how Satanism was something that was just told about other people as a way of dehumanizing and
Yes.
othering because they're different. These things don't exist in a vacuum. They keep happening over and over and over again. And it's pretty fascinating to sort of watch the metrics just happen over and over and over again. But the Stranger Things kind of thing, it does bring it back to the cultural milieu understanding that like, oh yeah, this actually, it's not just some funny metal guy on the roof of a trailer playing guitar. Spoiler alert, but whatever, it's been a year. This was actually like people went to jail
Right.
and are still in jail. Melvin Quinney was just released from prison and exonerated I think it was like 3 months ago down in Texas because of the Innocence Project. He was jailed in 1992, or he was accused in 1992 of satanic ritual abuse. And it's only now that his exoneration's happening. And there's all
Wow.
sorts of other things that are continually happening. We could do a whole episode
Sure.
on the fallout of the panic if you wanted to. Like it's insane,
We should.
just how bad it is. But there's actually a new movie coming out that goes over Michelle Remembers, which was kind of what kicked the whole thing off, which was this account of satanic ritual abuse by a gal and her therapist who did like repressed memories. He later married her. Like the whole thing was fucked and totally debunked. And I haven't seen the film yet, full disclosure, but it's called Satan Wants You, and that's coming out now. And so that's another, resurgence of some of this knowledge about the Satanic Panic. I'm going to shut up because I ramble. So
It's a no, thank you. I wanted you to get into that. And I'm glad you did, only because I feel like it surrounds this story. Some people might hear it and they might be like, again, if they haven't listened to our episode and they're not aware of what we stand for and stuff, like they might just hear it and be like, okay. But what we're saying is there's a long history, and I'm glad you specifically brought up the othering factor, because I think
mhm.
that's part of this story. People will look at whatever, it's them, you know.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, can you if we haven't touched on it already, because I know I ask questions and take us in different ways. I know we talked about what the story is about, but I want to give you the space. What do you want people to take home, and maybe what can people do? Can they do anything at this point since it's going into the court of law to like help out? I don't know. Just
Yeah.
trying to give you the space.
Well, for sure. I mean, I would like to deliver the invocation before the city council meeting. That is
Simple as
it.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very uh, I mean, it's going to be very hard to not be undoxed pretty soon. But you know, I'm very civically minded anyway in my own life, and being a part of, you know, I live in Chicago, and being a part of the Chicago community means interfacing, you know, and doing things. And as clergy in a minority religion, that is one way that I would like to fulfill my own satanic affirmations and values of pluralism and, you know, being a part of the process within the city. Um, I don't know why they're stopping me. I don't, well, to be fair, they haven't actually stopped me. They just haven't responded. And I think they're just kind of hoping they want me to go away. And I'm not going to do that. You know, but I mean, that's kind of where it is for me. I would just very much like to do that. As for what, you know, anybody else can do, I mean, I would say that if you're a member of a minority religion, request to give an invocation before your city council meeting.
Yeah.
Um,
And thank you for,
I mean,
sorry to cut you off, but thank you for bringing that up because that's important to understand about your plurality. We get into it in depth in our last conversation, but you would take issue if the city council told, like, for example, Jewish people that they couldn't do their invocation because it's against the Constitution, right?
well,
And
absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I'm not there to tell anybody else they can't.
right,
I'm there to request my time to do it.
sure,
That's it. It's not taking away anybody else's ability to do that. Again, it's a long-standing tradition of solemnizing these city proceedings, and everyone should have a hand in that if they want it.
I guess what I
Um,
was trying to say, and sorry again for cutting you off, but it's important to note, I think, that you do cherish the ability for everybody to give an invocation. You're not
100%.
right.
That's, yeah,
So that's
absolutely why I think that it would be great if other minority religions stepped up to do
yeah,
so. Um, you know, the other thing that people in Chicago can do, if you live within the city, would be to reach out to your alderperson, or the city council or the mayor or all three, and request that they let me do this, because ultimately the defense in this lawsuit is going to be paid by you, me, even me, the taxpayers in the city. And that's a giant bummer. So for what should be, in my opinion, a very, very simple thing. If this had just happened when I requested it,
right.
no one would have heard about it.
You've
It
done
just
it
would have,
twice on my podcast within a matter of a minute.
right.
So it's
It's
like not a big
in and
deal.
out. And let's be honest, you know, not everybody is civically minded. There's like 16 people that pay attention to the city council proceedings, other than what, you know, they read in Block Club or whatever. So uh, it would have been pretty quick and easy.
Right. We would have been done by now. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, any other stuff? Because I know I kind of cut in there a few times, but I felt it was important to clarify that plurality does mean, you know, it does mean that you do cherish everybody's ability, and I think
It
that's
absolutely
important.
does.
So
It absolutely does. It's freedom. It's, I mean, at the end of the day, it's ensuring that I don't encroach on the rights of anybody else, because if I do that, that encroaches upon my own.
right,
That's one of our tenets.
right,
But you know, that is a fundamental value in my opinion. And again, pluralism is something that is absolutely enshrined in our public discourse, in our democracy, and so on. And you know, since the last time I was on here, obviously, you know, we as Satanic Temple Illinois had another holiday display in the state capitol rotunda. You can see some of the apples from it behind, for anybody who maybe have seen that story, because we did the Copernicus book with the, you know, the snake wrapped around it and so on. It's really cool. Feel free to look it up. It was really, really neat. It had a lot of symbolism built into it. I was really happy with it. But even beyond that, like on my own time, like, you know, we do things that we don't necessarily advertise. Yeah, there it is. And so you know, I was invited to participate in an interfaith book club with the United Church of Christ out in one of the suburbs, and it was phenomenal. It was a really, really great time. We read a book by Eboo Patel about interfaith relations post 9/11 by a Muslim man, And it was really interesting to kind of come to the table. And, one of the parishioners was not very comfortable with me, with my presence there. And, I tried to offer as much empathy and sympathy as I could to that situation. But, and again, well, one, you have to meet people where they're at. But two, again, like I said, whatever, 30 minutes ago, it can be very challenging to one's worldview to have, the carpet ripped out from under you on something you've thought you've known for your whole life. And so, we tried to be very sympathetic to that. But that was a very, very good conversation. And there's been other instances of me being out and about and just putting my money where my mouth is. Like, I'm a community person. I live, I grow vegetables and I give them to my neighbors, and they all know who I am. Like, it's it just is just do good for people around you. That's like my basic philosophy, I guess.
Yeah.
And part of that includes ensuring the rights and plurality of others is respected and defended. If a member of a minority religion was having the same issue, saying, I can't, for some reason, the city council won't do this, I would call for them and say, hey, you should let them do this because that is what's just and right and pure.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that they respond, because like you say, a simple response would go a long way, and it'll be interesting to see what the future holds. I'll be looking at this story, Adam. Is there anything else before we shut down that you'd like to mention?
No, I don't think so. Well, actually, yeah, we will probably be doing another charity drive this summer. We did one last year. We call it Menstruating with Satan, where we collect menstrual products for those with uteruses that need them. And we partnered with the Pilsen Food Pantry. And we are actively spinning up our wheels to do another charity drive this summer. I don't have all the full details yet. But you can keep an eye on our website, which is the Satanic Temple Illinois.com, which is new. The website's actually new. We have an entire section on the Satanic Panic, for what it's worth, because education is very important. Knowledge is the greatest gift. Yeah, and then obviously keep an eye on our Facebook page too, because we usually announce stuff there.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to thank you again, Adam, for your time and for what you do. Stay in touch, and folks, check out the website. We'll have it in the podcast description. Hail
Awesome.
Satan. Hail Satan. For folks that are listening, I just showed I'm wearing a little satanic shirt right now. So
Perfect.
all right. Take care, folks. Thanks.
Thanks.